takes a second to connect to audio. So I just wanted to let everybody know, well, first of all, welcome everyone. And as you're logging in, your cameras and microphones have been set to remain off. So I just wanted to remind you to keep those off. Oops, I forgot to spotlight us. So let me spotlight the three of us while they are connecting to audio. There we go. All right, that's better. Welcome everybody. Like I said, your cameras and microphones have been set to remain off for the duration of the event. So if you could turn them off, that would be great. I'm Carrie. I'm from the Anderson's events team. And before we get started, I just wanted to take us a moment to welcome you to our event, of course, with the two amazing authors tonight, actually, Mary Dixie Carter and Sally Hepworth. I just wanted to take a quick second to thank you all for being here tonight. The Anderson's family has been selling books independently since 1875. So we've made it through some really tough times before, including the last pandemic. And we will make it through this time as well, but it's rough. And we just wanted to let you know that your support of this event by attending tonight, your purchase of the book through us, it allows us to remain in business. And we are truly grateful to you all for being here. A couple of things before we get started. As mentioned previously, your cameras and microphones are off. And that is to cut down on distraction while the authors are speaking, but also because it cuts down on that dreaded Zoom lag that we are all so tired of after a year of all this Zooming and lagging. So go ahead and just keep them off if you don't mind. And if you'd like to ask questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So go ahead and submit your questions through the chat function here on Zoom at the bottom of your screen. And I'll be collecting them throughout the program tonight. So while the authors are in conversation, you can go ahead and ask them as they occur to you at any time. And I'll be collecting them and then I'll come back in the end and I will feed them to the authors. One thing about that, I find that questions really make for a better event. So I don't know how many of you have been to some of our events so far or not. But the more questions we get, the more interactive and personal it feels, a little bit closer to that in-person format that we all miss so much. So please just go ahead and keep submitting those at any point throughout the evening. One more quick thing, if you've ordered a book for tonight, know that you will receive an email when your books are either ready to pick up or have shipped. And this can sometimes take us a day or two. So I just wanted to give you the heads up because we have actual human beings who process and fulfill those orders. So if you have not ordered your book for tonight or you'd like another signed copy, and I want to remind you that it is dads, grads, weddings, all the gift giving and party seasons coming up, and signed books just make a phenomenal gift and they never cost more at Anderson's. So if you'd like another signed copy, I'll be putting info on how to order that in the chat as well with a link that you can click onto. All right, I think all my housekeeping is done. So now we're going to get to the good stuff. We are here tonight, of course, with Mary Dixie Carter, whose writing has appeared in many well-known print and online publications. She worked at The Observer for 5 years, where she served as the publishing director. In addition to writing, she also has a background as a professional actor. Mary Dixie graduated from Harvard College, which is sort of impressive, with an honors degree in English literature and holds an MFA in creative writing from the New School. She lives in Brooklyn with her family, and The Photographer is her first novel, and it is fantastic. She is here tonight in conversation with Sally Hepworth, who has lived all around the world, spending extended periods in Singapore, the United Kingdom, and Canada. She is the author of many books, including The Secrets of Midwives, The Things We Keep, The Mother's Promise, The Family Next Door, and The Mother-in-Law. Sally now lives in Melbourne with her family and one adorable dog that I'm hoping, if we're good enough, we might actually get to see tonight. We'll see. All right. With that, I am going to go ahead and skedaddle out of here. I'm here if you guys need anything. Once again, thank you everyone for being here, and let me hand it over to these fine ladies.
Thank you. Sorry, I think you just lost me for a second. I've been trying to do this do not disturb thing on my phone and it has not been playing ball, but I'm here now. I'm Sally Hepworth and I am so delighted to introduce Mary Dixie Carter, who is the author of The Photographer, which is the book that we are talking about today. Congratulations, Mary Dixie, on this amazing book and welcome.
Thank you.
So good to have you.
To be here.
And I have been looking forward to this event so much since a few weeks ago when I was contacted by my publicist at St. Martin's, and she sent me a little blurb about your book and said, would you be interested in reading it? And I said, of course I would. I would love to read it. And the next thing, it arrived in my post box, and here it is. And one of the things that I love reading debut novels for is because you get to discover an author that's at the start of their career. And whenever I do it, I always think to myself, I can't wait to see where this author goes. I can't wait to see how this author matures, you know, into their writing and into their career. And with the photographer, it was like, this author is already there. This is a mature writer. This is not a debut novel in that way that you can read, you know, you see the talent, but you can see it growing. And then, of course, I went on and looked at your bio and I realized why. You spent a lot of your life writing, publishing. Your bio is just so impressive. So needless to say, I adored this book, and that's what we're going to talk about now. For everyone watching, as Kerry mentioned, there is going to be an opportunity for questions at the end. Don't be shy. When we get to the end of our chat, there's always a few minutes when people are a bit nervous to ask a question. Don't be nervous. Get in there and ask any questions you want to. We're open books, aren't we?
Yes, definitely.
We're happy
We'd
to
love any questions. The more, the better.
Any questions. And also there's going to be links to buy the book in the chat as well. So make sure you buy this book before it sells out, because it's going to sell out. Now, before we dive into questions, one thing that I thought I would start with, Mary Dixie, is a funny little thing that happened in our off-air communication. And that was when I emailed you and I called you Mary. And that's something that just happened before, and I think happens to you all the time. And in fact, your name is Mary Dixie. And the reason that this is relevant is because in this book, there is a character, Delta Dawn, right? And there was a bit of a lead in there, wasn't there, for you creating Delta Dawn? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. So my name is a little unusual if you live in New York or Los Angeles. It's a double name. It's this very Southern name. And it sort of, people notice. They sit up and take notice of my name, and it makes it's just specific. And so I kind of wanted Delta Dawn, the main character, the first person narrator, I wanted her to have the same kind of thing of a name that was just slightly odd. I mean, in a different way than mine is, but that would make her feel as though she didn't belong in Brooklyn. And that, I mean, there are a lot of things in the book, reasons that she feels she doesn't belong, but that's just one of them. And so the name was a conscious thing. And I think, you know, it did have something to do with me. I'm not saying that I'm similar to Delta Dawn because she's got a lot of issues.
That'll be funny once you've read that. You'll make sense of that comment. You're nothing like Delta Dawn.
But the thing that I'm connect with Delta Dawn, and that I hope other readers connect with too, is the feeling of sometimes feeling as though I'm an outsider. And I believe that almost everyone has that at certain times in their life, feeling like they want to be a part of something and they're on the outside, they're looking in and they can't get into the middle of the action. And so that is true of Delta, and it's a way in which I can relate to her.
Yeah. And as you say, it's one of many things. You really set up this character of Delta Dawn so well, and she's so threaded through with nuance and complexity. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I think it's probably a good time to give just an overview. Most of the people, I think, will not have read the book yet. So can you give us a little spoiler-free introduction to this amazing book?
So Delta Dawn is the photographer. She takes pictures of wealthy New Yorkers and their children. And at the opening of the book, she goes to the home of Amelia and Fritz Straub to photograph their daughter's birthday party. And she falls in love with a family and she becomes obsessed with this family. And the book is the story of her trying to insinuate herself into the family.
It's just so good. I mean, from the first page, it was working for me on every level. You know, those books where you just open the first page and you're in, you know, and not every book is going to be like that. There are books that, you know, you need to warm up and, you know, get in there, but this is not that book. This, every single page is working so hard and just getting you into the story. And it's a book for everyone to be reading this summer, and a great gift as well. It's so fantastic. One thing that in a way is obvious, we've all heard your bio and your extensive background in writing, publishing, you know, Harvard, you've got an MFA in creative writing. Why? So it isn't a surprise that you've decided to write a book, is my point. But why now? And why this book? What kind of inspired you to take that next step into novel writing?
Well, I hired a photographer a few years back myself to take pictures of my two children. And at that time, well, now they're 10 and 8, but this was a few years ago. And the pictures came back and they were really beautiful, but my children's eyes in the photos were cobalt blue, and they're not in real life. And I said to the photographer, I'd like for my children's eyes to be their real color. And she said, there is no real color. And that sentence stuck with me. And it was hard for me to get it out of my mind, that psychology that goes with it. There is no real color, there is no real anything. And that extrapolate out, and the person who sees the world that way and getting in that woman's head, that was what was intriguing to me.
I mean, that is the most inspiring thing right there, isn't it? That's a novel. I can see how just even there is no color, and seeing your children's eyes that way. And for those who, when you do go on and read this book, I can kind of hear Delta Dawn's voice in that comment as well. She makes a whole lot of amazing observations of all sorts throughout the book, and I am going to talk about this later, light and shade, color, so many things that she observed were so interesting, and that's what made her this amazing character. And I guess one of the things that I really loved from the first page was her observations of people. And I wrote down this comment that she made about Amelia, who of course is the mother of there's Amelia, there's Fritz, they're a married couple, and then there is their daughter Natalie. And at this moment, Delta Dawn is observing Amelia as she is observing her daughter, and they're about to take a photo. And she says, Amelia's posture, her tilted head, her soft smile were intended to convey extreme devotion to her daughter. Not that I considered her disingenuous, but I gathered that loving her daughter in front of witnesses helped cement a necessary self-image. And that is just one of so many observations that Amelia has throughout the book, the way she's characterizing people, and she's observing the way people love. And sometimes they're funny in their accuracy, and other times they're poignant, and other times they're sad. But I almost got the sense that in fact Delta Dawn was observing the world almost through a lens, which I think was so great about the photography. Just worked in so many ways. Was that your intention, that she was viewing the world that way?
Yes. So the photographer as a profession was like, that was the perfect choice for this character. Even had I not had that, a conversation with a photographer about my children's eyes, it's the perfect profession for her, because she's outside looking in. She feels as though she's not a part of it. She's just observing And that's sort of like the way that Delta operates in the world. And she really wants to be a part of it, but she can't. And she does have a lens on everything. And I think that, you know, there's room for interpretation. Like, is that really the way Amelia looked in that moment? You know, was Amelia putting on a show in a manner of speaking? Or is it Delta that's like imposing that on Amelia for her own weird reasons of wanting Amelia to be that kind of woman or that kind of mother? And throughout, I think that there are moments, and I change my mind actually about the moments as I go through, even when I go look at it now, like, is Delta telling the truth in this moment, or the truth, whatever, she's telling her own truth, and is it accurate or not? And that's one of the things that I was sort of playing with in this, and photography is perfect for that, especially because Delta can change photographs so easily, and she's so skilled at that, skilled at changing the photograph, and she doesn't really see the line between her imagination and reality. It's like, it's all, you know, there's no boundaries for her, and there's no boundaries also in terms of her relationship with Amelia and Fritz Straub, and like where she belongs with them, and understanding. She's super observant on some things, but she has blinders on with other things.
That's so true. And it's done so well. And I think the other thing about the lens is that kind of thin, almost veil that separates her from things, you know, that she feels like she's part of them, and that she's in that world, but then there's something also keeping her out. It just works on so many levels, and it's so clever. For those of you who read it, you know, there's so many things we haven't even mentioned that I've never seen a career. I don't feel like you could have had Delta Dawn without having the photography. I don't feel like that the two coexist.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you feel that way. That's kind of how I feel too. I feel like that the choice of her being a photographer is one and the same as the choice of her as a character, or finding her as a character. It's all like, it's who she is, you know, like deep down, that's who she is.
Exactly. And I guess I'll move on to talking about the photography and the more specific questions. I actually wondered, after having read this book, if you had a background in photography, and I don't think you do. Have you been a professional?
I don't have a background in photography. So while I was writing the book, maybe halfway through, I took a photography class, because at that point I sort of knew what I didn't know. I mean, I knew that there were these huge holes in my knowledge of photography, which I know very little about. And it's not like I need to be the photographer, but I need to understand it and understand some of the way, the thinking of. So I took a photography class, which helped with that. I also took, it was limited though. I mean, I am not a photographer. I'll just say that over and over again. But I also took a Photoshop class, which was also limited. But again, it gave me a little bit of vocabulary. And then, so as I was writing, I would come to a scene where Delta decides, okay, she wants to move this person's arm in this particular way, move their leg in this particular way. And what is the tool that she could use to accomplish that? So I would go online and look it up and try to find out, is there a tool out there, that a photo editing tool that would allow her to do that, that would allow her to change the body in this particular way? And then at the end, I did ask a couple of people to look at certain sections and to read it. And so I hope that photographers may find fault here and there. But I hope for the most part, it feels grounded and credible.
Well, I'm not a photographer myself, but I thought it sounded very, very incredible. And I think what really came across more for me as a non-photographer was not even the kind of technicalities of how it was done, but it came through in the way that Delta Dawn sees the world. You know, every time she walked into a room, she was aware of where the light was. You know, there were so many just little comments that were in the page about light and shade and about how to capture people. And, you know, I suppose in a way that is technical to photography. I'm sure light is the most important thing, but it worked from the plot perspective, but it also just worked on such a thematic level in terms of the light and shade to Delta Dawn. I mean,
yes,
that was just, again, one of the reasons why you can't separate Delta Dawn from being a photographer, don't you think?
Yes. So yes, I did make, I was very aware that Delta is going to, anytime she walks into a room, the first thing she's going to see is the light and the shade, whether she's taking pictures or not. And she has a conversation with Fritz about this, because Fritz and Amelia are architects, and they also, these characters, in the way they design homes, they're very aware of the light, and they're very aware of like the shadows that create spaces and how they use light. So Delta feels a bond with them over this kind of focus and understanding of light. And she feels like they have that in common.
I loved it so much, and it's made me think, and not that this is part of the essence of the book, but it's made me think a lot about light. And I'm quite often, since reading the book, looking at a kind of patch of light that's come through the window or, you know, into my office. I love it's the morning here in Australia and the light's coming into my office. And it's funny. I mean, light, when you pay attention to it, is so important, but there's probably so many of us that don't think about it that much. And for photographers, you do.
I'm so glad. That's a huge compliment that you've been thinking more about light since reading it. Thank you.
The best books are the ones that you close and then you keep thinking about. And this book definitely did that for me. But let's be real, this is it creepy? Is the word creepy book? Like, I don't know if that is the right word. It gave me an unsettled feeling from the first page, which I loved. Like, don't get me wrong, that is the best kind of thing. That feeling, not like there is a murderer, not that kind of book, but this feeling that something's not quite right, even in this kind of fairly normal setting. And that's what keeps the pages turning. But I mean, and I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but there's, you know, a scene of nudity and, you know, rolling around on a rug where someone might walk in, and there's scenes of, you know, you're inside Delta Dawn's head and you're thinking, I don't know what she's going to do. And before you said every time she walks into the room, and you were talking about light, and I thought you were going to say you start to worry, you know. I'm always a bit nervous. What's she going to do? Did you, because you just seem like sunshine and light to me, and so you've created this character. How did you feel when you were creating her? Did you have to kind of carry this sort of unsettled feeling with you as you wrote it? Did you ever find yourself going, Delta, what are you doing? Stop it. You know, tell me about writing a character like that.
So there were times, she's dark. And so getting into her head and going there was sometimes a little challenging. But what I really wanted from her, even though she knows how to conduct herself, you know, when she's speaking to people in conversation, she's missing some sort of like check on her behavior and her impulses. Like she just goes, and she doesn't have a sense of propriety, or like there's nothing holding her back. If no one else is in the room, there's nothing holding her back. And so I knew that that's what this character was. So I made myself like take away all my own preconceived ideas about like how one is supposed to behave and have her just like go, full charging ahead. And, it may be that because I am not like that at all, and I'm, very trying to be appropriate at the right time, or that there was some satisfaction in this character that just would like go do whatever she wanted to with no, with no editing of her behavior.
Yeah, I can see that that would be a or not liberating place to be, but a very interesting place to be when you get to step into a character's shoes that's so different. And yes, as I said, from what I can tell, you're very different to her. Did she ever surprise you? Did you ever think she's going to do this, and then as you were writing, she ended up doing something else? Or did you kind of have a good handle on it?
No, she did definitely surprised me a lot. I didn't plot it out. I didn't decide how it was going to end, but I didn't decide anything really. I like really tried to stay with that voice and stay with like what Delta really longs for and what she really wants and follow it. And there may have been a couple times where I kind of steered in a slightly different direction, but I did try to just follow that voice. And so sometimes there's some things that she did where I almost found myself laughing because it was so outrageous. And so I would like giggle to myself and be like, well, if I'm laughing to myself, that's probably the right choice.
Exactly. And you could feel that, because I think in some books characters do outrageous things, but it feels contrived in a way. But I think what was so great about Delta Dawn in The Photographer is it really felt like you led from her, the character, and that all of the things she did, while quite mad, if I can say that, quite crazy things, they felt right. They felt like what she would do, and so that really makes sense that you let her do her thing a little bit and stepped into her head.
Yes,
yeah.
That was my intention. Yeah.
So this is probably a good lead into process, which is my favorite question as a writer. And I know generally at these talks, there's always a few aspiring authors who are listening, and they never reveal themselves, but they're always listening. We know who you are. Hello and welcome. Tell us about, this is your first novel. Obviously you've got, a lot of credits to your name, and you know what you're doing. You've got your writing chops, but how do you even start? You had an idea, you met the photographer who told you about the eyes. What did you do next?
Well, I should preface it by saying that I did write another novel that was not published, and I still think it's good, but maybe one day it will be published. So the other novel that I wrote, I do think I learned a lot from that first novel that I wrote that's sitting in a file on my computer right now. As far as process, as I said, I got the idea of the photographer from this photographer, and my acting background, I think, helps me. You wouldn't necessarily think so, but I feel like I use the same muscles for acting and for writing. What I was trying to describe of like really getting into the head of this woman and getting into her body. And so as a stage actor, I am used to getting into the body of the character. So I'm sure that all writers get into the head of the character, and that's nothing unusual at all, but I am used to going one step further of like getting into the body and finding the character that way. And so I felt like it was the same process in a weird way as acting, like allowing the character to speak to me and tell me where to go and what to do, and not imposing anything on her. So so yeah, I do think my acting background was helpful. The other thing I think was helpful is my background as a journalist, because I'm used to writing in a very concise way and not
Yeah.
using extra words and really trying to like find the through line and make the point. And so, I mean, I write very short, like my novel tends to, I mean, I did add a little bit, and once with my agent and editor, we added a little bit, but my writing does tend to be short, and I think that's because I've read so many plays. I was sort of trying to analyze it, and because I've read so many plays, I think the rhythm of a play, which is very, it's a lot shorter, obviously, than a novel, is kind of in my head, and like that, you need to kind of escalate it rather quickly. So that's that maybe. And then the other thing is the dialogue. I lead with a dialogue, and I think that probably comes from my background in the theater too, like leading with a dialogue, and that's what I get first, and that's how I find the arc of the story. And then I went back and filled in the scenes and the world around these characters and what that world is.
Yeah, wow. There are so many good nuggets of wisdom there. I was thinking as you talked about the stepping into the character's body, it's a little bit method writing. Isn't there a technique called method acting where
Yes.
this is kind of method writing? And I heard an author say once, and I can't remember who it was, that they would even dress like their character when they were writing.
Oh, did they
character.
really? Oh, that's fabulous.
Yes, isn't that fantastic? And I've never done anything as fun as that, and maybe I will now that I've listened to you. But the writing short, I think, well, it works really well for psychological thrillers. I like to write short too, but I think that's probably one of the differences between your writing and what I had seen in other debuts, is that it short writing is hard writing, isn't it? Because every word has to work hard for you,
right.
and it's the challenge to say something as evocatively as you do in short sentences, and you do it so well. So maybe you need to pad it out, but in fact I think you say a lot in just a few words. I'll ask you one more process question because I just need to know, and then a few more questions. We're going to go to questions in a minute, so if anyone's got burning questions, pop them in. But in terms of a day-to-day process thing, when you're writing the book, do you have a kind of certain word count in mind that you want to get to each day, or do you just let it flow? Do you do any sort of structure around that, or do you just see what happens?
I'd say it's more like a number of hours that I try to be sitting at the desk doing something. And so like, and some days are just less productive. So I don't force myself to get a word count, but I'm aware of the word count, but I do make myself kind of sit there and work on it, even when nothing good comes of it. But I think, I'm sure you would agree with this, that all the bad writing leads to the good writing. So like all those days when I write something and I'm like, this is just terrible. I do think that you get something out of it. It's hard to feel that way when you're in it and you're just seeing this terrible writing. But once if you can get through that, it does make the final product richer, I think.
I agree completely. I feel like 90% of the writing I do feels like really bad writing. But, often you look back the next day and you realize how much of it was mood, and you think, actually, that's not that bad. It's not great, but it's not terrible. And it's true. It's just, it's art, but it's also discipline, isn't it? And both kind of need to happen to get a product.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. It's a lot of just making yourself do it day in and day out until it's done.
Exactly. But I think we got a few questions, Kerry.
Yeah, we do. I'm back. I always pop in and scare people here at the end, so I try to be like graceful about it. That was awesome, you guys. Thank you so much. That was a really fascinating discussion to watch. And I know we've got a couple good questions, and I think right now, we should be able to get through most of them. Keep coming, though. Keep putting them in if you have them, and we'll try to get through as many as we can before our time together has to end in about 20 minutes. So keep putting them through. Let's start. This is from Hillsman Heath. And they asked, how does creating characters in fiction differ or resonate with approaching creating a character when acting?
Oh, good question.
So this is exactly the thing that we were talking about, the creating the character when acting is so similar. I really do think it's very similar. It's finding the person, finding how that character ticks and what motivates them and what is like the thing that they want the most in the world. And, within each scene, finding what does that character want in that scene? What is that character trying to achieve in that scene? And how does that help that character get it in the overarching arc of the story? So I feel like actors really need to do that. They really need to have that focus and action that they're playing. And writers need to do that, except that they need to do it for a lot of different characters, not just one. So novelists rather need to do that too. So I think they're extremely similar. I really do.
That's really interesting. I don't get to interview a lot of actress slash fictional authors. So that's actually a really cool perspective. Thanks for sharing. This is from Richard Marks, who has a very cool name. He said, are you into photography yourself, which you did sort of address already, but does the book focus on healing the protagonist?
Healing the protagonist. Healing the protagonist. I don't want to spoil the ending. I don't know what Sally thinks about this. I would say that this protagonist, she definitely is likely to repeat what she did once. She's probably going to do it again. I would say that's fairly likely. Yeah. What do you think, Sally?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is a book about healing. This is a lot of things. This is a book about a very interesting, troubled, there's a lot of things going on in this book. I wouldn't say healing is one of them, but that could be a future book. We all pray for healing in the future for Delta Dawn.
So on that note then, this is from Kathy, and this kind of goes along with what we're talking about here. She says, Delta seems to have kept her aberrant imagery life in check prior to this episode with the Straubs. Do you think that Delta will descend further into this madness? Or do you think that it sounds like you already answered this, do you think this will be a singular interlude in her life?
I think that she's going to continue in this path that she's on, but I don't want to spoil the ending, but I do think that she is going to continue on her path, which I think she's going to repeat a lot of what she does, and maybe one day she will learn a lesson and change, but I don't think it's going to happen immediately.
Interesting.
And I think over the course of the book, you really get to understand her and come to a really good it's more about peeling back the layers of the onion of who she is and a little bit why she's like that, and then you kind of, the ending just feels so just the right ending for her. I think it's very satisfying in that way.
I didn't get a chance to read an advanced copy of this one because it was always checked out of our ARC room, which just goes to show you how much people liked it.
Okay.
But my coworkers all said the same thing, that the ending is fantastic. And so we do have a question here from Kara, sorry. about the ending. And first of all, she wants to say that she loved it and
Okay,
that
thank
it
you.
totally went in a different direction than she anticipated. I always love when books do that. But she said, did you already have Delta Dawn's ending written in your mind to deviate from where, we saw it going, where the reader saw it going?
I did not know the ending. I came upon the ending as I was writing it. I really did. And I surprised myself with the ending, which kind of was intentional. I wanted to surprise myself with the ending because I didn't want to sort of nail it down. So I'm really glad that your experience was that you were surprised by the ending and you did not predict it, because that was my hope for the reader.
Okay. I'm going to further that question because you both write twisty books. And I read these twisty books. I think we all read these twisty books. And there's at least always one point in the book where you say to yourself, like, oh, this author tried to get me, but I totally have this figured out. And I'm so smart, only to, of course, have it just totally blown out of the water. And you're like, oh, never mind. So I've always wondered, do you write the whole book in the story and then kind of go back and put those in? And I guess this would be for both of you, those little red herrings, or do you kind of put those red herrings in as you go? Do they develop kind of organically, or do you kind of really try to put them in various places?
Sally, you
wanna-
answer.
Okay, all right. Well, for me, and every writer is different, and the more writers I meet, the more I realize how true that is. But I probably consider myself a plotter to an extent, and every time I write a book, and I've just finished my 8th, which is not out yet, but I do it a little bit differently. Oh, bless your cotton socks. And I have done it with nothing but a question in my mind and a blank page, and I've done it with an Excel spreadsheet with every scene in it. That said, I have the twists that I'm always really mad about, and I'm really, by mad I mean happy, because there might be an Australianism. I find they're the ones that happen as I write, because no matter how much you plan, if you're a planner, what you put in an Excel spreadsheet cell, or what you write down, or a note-taking exercise, is never the rich living thing that it is when you're writing an actual scene. And often by the time you get to the scene that you planned, you think, well, no, Delta Dawn wouldn't do that, or Fern wouldn't do that. That doesn't work. But oh my gosh, this just happened. And you can be surprised by things that once you've got to know the character and got to know the world, you realize that the red herring that maybe you'd planned doesn't work, but something else works better instead. That's kind of how it works for me. What about you, Mary Dixie?
So I can think of one example, and I'm thinking of in my head, which I don't want to spoil it for the readers, but I can think of one example where I went back and deleted some phrases and paragraphs in order to leave something open so the reader would not know what was going to happen, or that the reader would not guess as clearly. So in this particular case, it was a matter of going back and deleting some information, or making it a little bit vague and ambivalent, so that so the reader wouldn't quite be sure of how the direction it was going. I don't want to say exactly what that information was, but.
All right, well, that makes sense, because so many people here haven't read it yet, although a few people have read it. And like Mike Chen says, fantastic read, in all caps. I could not put the book down. That's what my coworkers are saying as well. Are there plans for more novels about Delta?
I do not plan to write another novel about Delta at this time. I am working on a second novel, but it is not anything to do with Delta. I can say that the photographer is being developed into a series, which I'm very excited about, but I can't say any specifics about it, but I'm very excited that it's in the works right now. And maybe one day I will write something else about Delta, but I don't think at this moment, I won't.
Congratulations. That's so cool.
That is very cool. That's awesome. This is a great question from Kathy, and I love asking authors this question. So Kathy, I'm glad you sent it in. She said, for Mary Dixie, do you like Delta? Do you pity her? If you don't like her, how do you spend so much time with her when you're writing? And I think this is actually a great question for both of you, because you both write characters who it can be hard to love. So what's it like to spend that time with them?
I feel for Delta. I really do. And I admire a lot of things about her. I admire her intelligence and her, like, she's just very perceptive and she's talented and she's a lot of things that I admire. And I also empathize with her. And I kind of understand who she is on some level. Do I like her as in, like, would I want to hang out with her and have lunch with her? Maybe not.
Yeah.
What do you think,
It's
Sally?
so true. Yeah, I think the same thing. It's that you don't necessarily like them, although I wouldn't say that I didn't like Delta Dawn, for example. Like I like you said, I understood her and I felt for her in a lot of ways. And I think that in my characters, the same thing. It often isn't about liking, but it is about understanding. And often I have scenes of backstory that don't make it into the book, that have just been written for the purposes of me understanding, particularly a troubled character or a difficult to like character, and making sense of why they are who they are, because that's what's interesting to me as a writer and as a reader. And I also don't believe that anyone is all bad or all good. I think good people are capable of bad and bad people are capable of good. And generally speaking, even the most evil of characters love their children, or, you know, has got some admirable quality, and being able to find that as a author is a really good, fun thing to be able to do.
All right, that's a great answer. All right, so I am going to ask you guys, what is next for you both? I want to hear what both of you are up to and what's coming out next.
Well, I'll go and then we can finish with you, because this is your moment, Mary Dixie. But I have got a new novel coming out in it'll be in April next year for the States. It's called The Younger Wife, and I'm busy working on the new book for the year after that. So I'm keeping myself out of trouble. What about you?
Well, I'll tell you in a moment, but I just want to say that The Good Sister, if you have not read it, is such a wonderful novel, and you should go out and you should get it right now. I am working on a second novel, but it does have the outsider theme reappearing in it, but it's very different, and I can't share too much more about it because it's in the early stages, but hopefully I will be able to soon.
Yay, that's so exciting.
Exciting.
Exciting for you both. All right, well, we're almost out of time here, but I would like to end with a question. It's my favorite question that I always ask every author, and it's twofold. What is something good that you have read lately that is maybe already out? And then what is something good, because I know you guys get peeks at a lot of upcoming stuff that other authors are writing. What is something that you're excited about that's coming out anytime?
Well, for me, the two best books that I have read recently, one was The Photographer. Genuinely, probably this one, and the other book that the equal favorites, which was The Guncle by Stephen Rowley, which is about oh my goodness, it's a Guncle is gay uncle. I hadn't heard that term before, and it's about an uncle who ends up taking custody of his niece and nephew over a summer period while they're going through the loss of their mother. And it's a strangely funny, upbeat book since it's going through grief. Hilarious, sad, beautiful, and definitely worth a read. And then the Photographer, for all of the reasons that I have mentioned here today, I think will be the best summer reading for everyone who's watching. So go and get both. And I think you can get, there's a link in the comments, isn't there, to buy this one. So support your local bookstores.
One more time right now. Thank you. Yes, we need it. How about you, Mary?
So I just, in terms of a book that has not come out, I just read The Favor by Nora Murphy, and it was really, really interesting about, there's a sort of strangers on a train feeling to it. You know, the Patricia Highsmith where, well, I don't want to say too much and spoil it, but it is not out, and I think it'll be out probably next year. Then I'm just going to repeat that this is the best thing I've read lately, The Good Sister.
That is a good one. Yes, definitely. That was a great one, Sally.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's just about going to do it for us tonight. Our time is sadly coming to an end. Thank you again, both of you, so much. That was a really fascinating conversation, and we just really appreciate you both for being here and your support of Anderson's and small independent bookstores in general, of course. And thank you to everybody out there for being here. We get the question at every single event, so I'll answer it. In terms of when we are going to start in-person events again, we've been told maybe to expect a few in the fall. So, but for right now and through the summer, we will continue in this virtual format. And I'm sure you're all very tired of me by now because I'm like the only one that does these, but we are so grateful for your continued support. And other than that, I just wanted to say good night. And I think we're almost through this whole horrible time, and stay safe out there.
Thank you for having us. And thank you, Mary Dixie.
Thank you. Thank you both. It was such a pleasure to be here tonight.
It was a pleasure to have you. And I hope we can have you in person soon for your next book, and you'll be able to sign the Anderson's wall. So
wonderful.
Can't wait for the day. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye, Carrie. Bye, Sally.
So nice to meet you both.